quick. I've got to think about mathematics because otherwise I'm going to flip. Malcolm Sabin that stuff that he did on Krieging. Krieg, I somehow thought it was Krieg because I thought it was named after a South African gold prospector. Well, a guy who worked for a company. Maybe I imagined that, but now it's spelled Krig. The idea is that you take discrete samples and use them to construct a continuous smooth surface, and it uses Lagrange's what is it called? Lagrange minimization? It uses techniques that sit nicely with Bayesian probability. So it seems as if you're saying, what if we have a smooth continuous distribution? What is the smoothest continuous distribution that best explains these discrete samples? And the use in topographical mapping is just that if you have a grid which is a peculiarly regular set of discrete samples, like the SRTM mission was it a 3-minute or 1-minute arc radar survey, and that produces a regular grid. But Krieging is a more generalized version where you may, if you're in a geological survey and you're doing point tests of content of some mineral in a matrix somewhere that's you're sampling, you may not be able to get to the points on the regular. So it works with a general mesh rather than just a regular. And what I was going to talk about was when you're doing things like CAD and parameterizing designs for, say, an airframe or some sort of envelope for a dirigible, my idea was to deform the grid using a grid which was composed of polynomial splines, cubic splines, or I think I get There's a work by a biologist, Darcy Thompson, who managed to produce the forms of a lot of different body patterns of fish, for example. I remember seeing fish by drawing basically the same fish but deforming the grid, and that gives you a kind of model of what's it called? Phytotaxis. The way an organism grows, the way the cells differentiate and divide during development. I can't remember the words. I'm out of. I need to be able to look up more stuff, but it's such a pain in the ass on the telephone, and when at the same time you're involved in stupid art projects that are people trying to send you messages from God or something. Really don't need that kind of stuff. Anyway, those Bezier splines are useful for a lot more than just engineering, and you can do a lot with building meshes that are peculiar to the design of your thing. You can things like struts and frames that are covered in, say, carbon fiber sheets. You can describe them as cross sections developed on coordinate systems. A kind of, what you do is you generalize the coordinate system. When dear, so you can have a coordinate system for a wing, and you can have a coordinate system for the body of the thing if you're designing an aircraft. And it's quite easy to translate those coordinate systems and do things. Say you want to model them, say you want to produce a solid model from and you want to render it under certain lighting conditions. You can effectively translate the equations that describe the surfaces. You're translating the coordinate systems, and there's a lot of possibilities for optimization because, well, just because. But the way you solve the resulting equations also came into what I was. This is back in Cochabamba on the street chewing cocoa that I was thinking about this. When you're constructing a model moving through a space with the light sources and things changing, you only need to render to a certain resolution from your point of view. And in addition, if you're rendering a moving scene, I had some ideas about how you distribute the error in the discrete approximations, because you're rendering a smooth, continuous surface. The error in the discrete approximations can be distributed not only spatially, but from frame to frame. So say you've only got a restricted number, you've only got 24 bits of RGB to represent each. Well, that's extreme. Let's say you want to do it with just 12 bits. Not only do you have latitude in this Gaussian error function came into it, and I couldn't. I once read a beautiful description of Gauss's error function that made complete sense, and I thought it was on Wikipedia somewhere, but it disappeared. I never found it again. It was something to do with the error just being a function of the derivative. And when you look at it, you think, well, what an amazing, how come? And when I read it, I thought, I know, because Gauss is thinking from the point of view of we don't know what the actual function is. All we know are its values to within a certain degree. And he'd done it from, he's sort of saying, how wrong could we be about the function? And it turns out that it's just in the first derivative of I've not explained that well, but I didn't understand it that well. Anyway, you get the idea that not only do you have error distributed along, if you think of Bresenham's algorithm for drawing circles, that using just the 2D one that's in all the computer graphics courses. If you think of that circle as growing, then you can distribute the error not only around your quantization error is distributed not only on the spatial dimension but in the time dimension as well. If you then model an optical transfer function, you have all sorts of other possibilities in representing different colors. For example, a kind of pulse width modulation of the pixels. If you display red at this, blue at this, green at this, and you do the red for 2 cycles, the blue for 1 and the green for the other, you increase the number of colors that you can display. But we're dealing now with a moving image, so you've got a function, a continuous function underneath it. These ideas all came from this insight that when you represent objects out there in the world, you're representing them from a single point of view. You're taking a slice of time and a slice of a point of view in space. But all the functions become continuous when you consider the whole. And if your design of your rendering, rendering pipeline, you can redesign it so that you take into account this whole and the transfer function. You can really, my idea is you could really optimize the amount of computation necessary to produce a representation of a certain fidelity, and you can use ideas of transfer functions and signals and systems in that in order to, so it's kind of like there's an architecture there for and it works not only for rendering and 3 dimensions, but it ought to work also for parameterized design. I was talking about parameterized computer-aided design. There ought to be a way to as you vary the parameters, you're also moving through another space, and you ought to even be able to take finite element codes optimized for certain parameterizations and be able to kind of pre-compute part of the finite element. I don't know that much about finite element analysis, but if you integrated that finite element analysis into the same modeling rendering pipeline, you could think of the pipeline as exploring a design phase space. And have some sort of sane way to control the amount of computation that you need to do, and the granularity, or the how fine your mesh is that you need to model. So I think that's the way to think about modeling in general. And I'm saying that it has practical applications when you apply it to graphics or computer design or computer-aided design or or finite element analysis, or whatever particular field you are. But you need a coherent framework in which to do this, and that's ultimately mathematical, and it's the bit I'm interested in is the maths, the way you solve the equations, and so that work on p-adics and the connection between p-adics and the Laplace transforms is really interesting. Oh, I had some lovely pictures in my head. It works for stereoscopic representation too, because when you're rendering in stereoscopic images, you're basically tracking the left and right eye along your digital, your virtual camera is two virtual cameras separated, so you get a lot of optimize. Yeah, you can presumably distribute sampling errors across those two points of view, because imagine as often as you move, your right eye is going to see something from your left eye, so there's going to be very high correlation between those two tracks, and in the end it's just going to be some kind of convolution. So is this how Dassault CAD works? Did they get there ahead of me? Hope so. I'd love to see that stuff. And my parents won't even talk about what they've done with their house that they had in France. Nobody says anything about that.